Gentlemen, John Moses Browning is often referred to being one of the best firearm designers of all time. But did you know there was a man that John Moses Browning thought was a better gun designer than himself? John Pedersen. Now, John Pedersen would actually go on to design a gun that I'm using right now in this video, the Remington Model 10 Trenchgun configuration. So let's dive on in. Trivia lesson, what was the major world event that took place between 1914 and 1918? Correct, World War I. Good job, viewer. You did your job and paid attention. World War I hits the European theaters and everyone's killing each other over in Europe. Even though we called it a World War, it was mainly the European Ottoman Turkey affair. It was like Gallipoli in World War I. There was some other stuff happening, but for the majority of human suffering, it took place in the European theater. Now, a lot of guys were using bolt-action weapons. It was the standard of the day. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the bolt-action weapon, which I don't know how you would be. Unfamiliar with the bolt-action rifle, typically what happens when you shoot a bolt-action, you have to cycle the action with your shooting hand, unless you're a freak like Jackson from Saving Private Ryan, who was for whatever reason shooting from his left hand, and he would come over and like, he was still using his shooting hand pretty much though. Anyhow, what comes along are these people called the Americans.
It's gonna be a bloodbath.
And what they bring to World War I is shotguns. Now, the Germans didn't like this very much.
Using a shotgun.
So they actually filed formal complaints, and the Americans were like, hey, we don't care, we're still using our tube guns. It's essentially like using shrapnel contained inside of a rifle, i.e. a shotgun. And it's weird too, because shotguns have been around for a really long time. You can trace a shotgun back to a blunderbuss, and for whatever reason, the Germans were complaining. Like, GG, get good, maybe you should have brought shot. Like, they had SMGs. Why are you complaining, guys? You're just playing high-stakes airsoft against guys that speak a slightly different language than you. Now, what the Americans show up with is the trench gun. We call the trench gun a trench gun because it's supposed to be used in the trenches. Duh. I'm just kidding. No, there's kind of two things that really set a trench gun apart. For what we kind of see is going to be the heat guard, and then it had the bayonet lug. Now, what the bayonet lug is, why this looks so weird and funky on the end of the barrel, if you're not aware, the manufacturers of all the bayonets, they were kind of looking at this, and the military-industrial complex was like, okay, we either have to make a whole new bayonet for these shotguns, or we add a lug and we can use the existing bayonets that are coming out of the factory like hotcakes. And everyone at that time in the world loved their bayonets. It was kind of like the, you just don't leave home without your bayonet kind of vibe. Kind of sick, dude. Turns this thing into a spear. It's really interesting because it's like, you had to think the military leadership, a lot of these guys are born usually around like the 1860s, around that time frame. And what happened in the 1860s, at least for the American leadership? Civil War, you guessed it. Good job, you paid attention in history class. A lot of what was happening in the Civil War was like the tail end of, say, like the Revolutionary War era, the line formation fighting, where everyone lines up, they fix bayonets, they're doing the line formation with their muskets. They had rifles, but they're black powder muzzle loaders. And bayonet charges were a big tactic in the day. Even at the beginning of World War I, they were still fielding cavalry in an attempt to have that old style of lightning warfare. Of course, the horse would be replaced by the tank, and the rest is history. Kind of. The bayonet is still very important and they have to have it, i.e. that's why it was so important. Now, the Winchester 1897 had the patent on their style of bayonet lug, and Remington was looking at that and saying, hey, we can't do a patent infringement, so they had to design a whole new bayonet lug for it. Now, on the Winchester 1897s, there's actually these milled out lines where the screws go for that bayonet lug so it doesn't move, but it's a whole patent thing. Remington couldn't do that, so they have to rely on this set screw on the front to really lock it into place. Now, the Remington Model 10 has a 23-inch barrel, whereas the 1897 has a 20-inch barrel. Now, another very key distinctive thing here is going to be the heat guard. But to implement that bayonet really well, you want to have that early C-clamp, right? This is what we call the C-clamp of the old days. You know how the high-speed guys have their C-clamps today? The old guys back then had their steed clamp, but they used it for bayonets. So you could really get a death grip on your bayonet and skewer your bad guy. So the heat guard was really important. Now Winchester also had the patent on the metal heat guard. I'm sure Remington could have come up with a different metal handguard patent, but for whatever reason, they chose a wooden handguard. What's cool is it does give it a very unique look. It gives it a very interesting aesthetic. I kind of like that about that, but a big downside from what I've been seeing, and you can figure it out, is that it really conceals the bead on the front. From the pictures and doing a little bit of the research I was doing, the bead sight I saw in some of the older pictures was actually a raised up, I think it's called like a tower bead. I could be wrong here. I'm yet again an amateur when it comes to some of this stuff, but I do find it really fascinating. Like I think this stuff is really cool, but bear with me, I could get something wrong. So if I do, please let me know in the comment section down below, as you should. I think they would have had a raised up bead sight because when you're aiming down the gun, when you get a really good tight cheek weld, the bead sight at the front disappears. So to even use that bead sight, I was kind of just getting off the gun and looking for the top of it, and I had to start shooting lower, or holding lower, I should say, for my rounds to impact where I wanted them to. And of course, I do love the wooden pump on this gun, a very elegant look. I love the wood.
If you edit this out of context, you're being intellectually dishonest.
Like those old guns with the wood they have, really a beautiful mashup of metal meets nature. When I started Coleon noiring the video, the wood stock is like the elegant curves of a beautiful woman. That's about as Coleon as I'll get. Okay, so that's the two main things going on. I mean, the historical context is that Remington and Winchester were both kind of edging and jockeying each other for the shotgun market, and it seemed like Winchester was always one step ahead. Now this, to be fair, is a really good shotgun design, minus I think the complex nature of the bolt inside of it, or the firing mechanism inside of it looks kind of complicated from what I've seen. So I do want to give some credit, because when I was doing my research, there's a little bit of Googling, a little bit of searching around the web, trying to find reference photos of soldiers actually using a Remington Model 10 trench. I came across CNR Arsenal with Othias doing like a 50-minute video on a very much more in-depth version of this gun.
Look at the overall length of this sucker. That really starts to creep up.
The problem is that video is like for the kids that got A's in school, and I was the kid that got like a C, so we're really doing the dumbed down version. You're welcome. Now, the Winchester 1897 was the more widely used shotgun in the First World War and in the Second World War. They, of course, came out with some different shotguns in World War II. The Remington shotguns also showed up in World War II. I just don't know how much in this trench configuration, because after the war, they would kind of modify these into riot guns. I don't know why I said kinda. The more widespread use of the shotgun in World War I was typically credited to the 1897 Winchester trench gun, because there's only about 3,500 Remington Model 10 trenches that showed up, which is a pretty small number in the grand scheme of a war. And after the war, a lot of the old Remingtons got converted into riot guns. So they would ditch the heat guard, ditch the lug, and they would chop the barrel down. Grenade! Finding legit Remington Model 10s is pretty hard. So how I acquired this one, actually, funny enough. Dude, I'm glad you asked. Thanks for being so inquisitive. Wow, you sitting on your couch, eating your coffee, drinking your beer, maybe you're time thefting on the toilet. Wow. You were just something else. Sly dog. So, how did I acquire this gun? Well, essentially, I was at a gun show called the SAR here in Phoenix, and I was walking around, beep-bopping around, and I saw this bad boy, and I was like very inquisitive, because I was like, this looks like a trench gun, but it's not an 1897, so the old FUD that was talking to me, God bless his heart, he was like, this here, Sonny, is a Remington Model 10 trench. Very few, very rare. It's not legit, but it has been retrofitted and modified. So he added the repro bayonet lug and a new heat guard that he apparently made. And funny enough, it does have US markings and the Remington bombshell, the firebomb mark on it. So I mean, I don't know how in the ballpark it is. I'm not really an expert at this stuff, but it's pretty cool. And sadly, it did cost me a lot of money. So thank you to this video's sponsor. Have you been seriously injured by a trench gun? Morgan & Morgan is here to help. Your serious injury may be worth millions. And when it comes to injury law firms, Morgan & Morgan is the biggest in the country. And Morgan & Morgan doesn't settle for low offers. Recently, Morgan & Morgan have seen verdicts of $12 million in Florida, $26 million in Philadelphia, and almost $7 million in New York. Orders of magnitude above than the highest insurance offer. Morgan & Morgan does not have sign-up fees or costs. The fee is absolutely free unless they win. They will do whatever is necessary to get the job done, ranging from car accidents, medical malpractice, or defective products. They have specialized lawyers available for your case. You can start your claim with Morgan & Morgan with just a click. If you go to forthepeople.com/administrative, or if you click the link in the description down below. Big thank you for Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this video's Murder Stick segment. Gee, what a sponsor. Now, one thing I really like about this shotgun in comparison to the 1897 is that I'm not afraid of an action coming back and hit me in the knuckle like on the 1897, and everything is very enclosed in the gun. So you only have one hole for loading and ejecting, as opposed to the 1897 that is pretty exposed. You have the rear hammer assembly that also comes out, then you also have the loading face, and then even when the gun's locked back to the rear and enclosed, there's still a lot of chance for debris to get inside of that weapon. So as far as a combat shotgun goes, this one makes a lot of sense. Now, what it doesn't have, I don't think it's as sexy and as elegant looking as the 1897. I will happily say that. I'm not biased towards this gun whatsoever. I think it's a really cool piece of history, but I think the 1897 looks a little bit better. I love how the 1897 is a little more flush down low with the bayonet lugging the barrel, as opposed to this one, how it's a little bit riding up high and it kind of like hangs out there a little bit weird. So what are you gonna do? But I think the action is superior to the 1897. So if I could have my dream gun, it would be like a marriage of this receiver with the look of the front end of a Winchester 1897. That'd probably be the dream. I think that's pretty fair. Pretty fair? Fair. Yeah, it's fair. All right. May thy knife chip and shatter.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
Now, one of my favorite games is going to be Hell Let Loose, and in that game, you can play as an American, the assault class, unlock level 3, you get yourself an 1897 trench gun. And I have used that gun to great effect in that game, and one of my longest headshots I got was at 89 meters. So I'm gonna try and recreate that today with a German helmet. Jordan, bring in the German helmet. Got us a nice little metal German helmet here, a little repro, going on our kneeling dummy. Don't ask any questions why you're so short. Come on, buddy. That'll work. Now let's go see how far we can push this bad boy out. Science. I think we're about pretty far away. This feels like at least 70 meters. So we'll start here. All right, let's go see what happened after that first salvo. Really looks like we did no damage at all except for this one spot over here. Nothing seemed to really do it in, so we're off to a bad start. I don't know, man, maybe they made the trench gun and Hell Let Loose a little bit too good. So we're back to the 50-yard mark. We'll see what we can't do with it. Oh, definitely heard something. It kind of sounds like the Hell Let Loose helmet sound. That's very satisfying. Let's go check it out. We're coming over. Look at that, that's pretty cool. There we go. For sure got ourselves an impact now. Look at that. You can see another one up top too. But it didn't penetrate, so that wouldn't count as a kill unless I hit him in the face, which is possible, but alas, not part of the test. See how much closer we gotta get before this mug penetrates. We'll tip her down a little bit more. Science. Moved up about 15 yards. I'm not seeing any impacts. We'll get that, so all right. Falling apart. My hits are just not landing where I want them to, so we'll try this again. There we go. I found my hold. Let's go check out the results. The administrative results. Oh, another front helmet hit. Still no penetration, like most of your prom nights. We're about 20 yards away. There we go. Man, this thing is taking a licking and keep on ticking. Got some really good hits on it this time. You can start to see a little bit deeper. Still nothing has penetrated whatsoever. We'll see how close we have to get before we get one in there. I'm starting to get a little bit nervous. If I get too close, we're gonna get a ricochet. This bad boy can take the hat off an elite at 20 feet. I think that one did it in. If it didn't do it in from here, we're like 10 yards away. I don't know what will. Holy crap, we finally defeated the helmet. We got some holes in there on the top, but she really is taking a beating, man. Like, that's impressive. All right, we'll try the back of the head. POV, you just caught the Germans spawning at an outpost and Hell Let Loose. They don't know you're there because you're behind them. The best place to be when encountering the enemy, on their flank. Probably something Jocko said, but all right. You got blown up by artillery and Hell Let Loose? Good, you'll get a better spot. Tell you, turns out just like armor, it's weaker in the rear. We finally got a clean hole, which it's still deflected too. I mean, that's kind of crazy. Crazy. All right, so I'm going for some redemption on trying to hit the grenade out of the sky with some buckshot. We have a safe backstop where I know the rounds aren't gonna get that far, and we're gonna send it. So this one's actually pretty tricky. I watched May do it on the CNR video, and I was like, I wanna try this out myself. We're gonna start the low ready like I'm on patrol. Ah, I got a hit. I got a hit. We got the top of her. We finally got it, boys. We finally got it. Let's see if I can do another one. I love the idea of like your commanding officer being in the trenches and it's like, all right, which one of you hayseeds grew up shooting shotguns? The Germans keep throwing grenades at us. We'll try it like I'm on a creeping patrol. We just got a grenade thrown at us. Grenade! I don't see any new impacts. That is tricky, man. That is tough. Earlier in this video, you're probably wondering, hey admin, where'd you get that sick frog skin camo? That World War II Marine frog skin camo? I got it from one of the sponsors of this episode. Americana Pipes and Apparel, fantastic young Zoomers, sponsoring the channel into all of our shenanigans, so go check them out. They have a bunch of cool Milsurp night vision knives manuals on the website. Stay up to date because cool stuff does fly off their shelves. Go check them out, guys. I love them dearly, and they'll love you too. So as far as pop culture significance of the Remington Model 10 Trench, there's really not much besides a very large shooter, and that would be Battlefield 1, which we all know and love. I love Battlefield 1. I am a big fan of it. How historically inaccurate is it? It's not like a hardcore shooter, but damn, is it fun, buddy. It's a good time. So there is that where it shows up, and funny enough, thanks to IMFDB, it also says that a Remington Model 10 does show up in The Notebook, funny enough, of all movies. So I think it even said that Ryan Gosling even used it, so he is literally us. Thanks, Ryan Gosling. It showed us some other stuff, some older stuff, but that's about it. I didn't really see anything of the actual trench variant besides Battlefield 1, but it's always fun to talk about that because pop culture and guns often have a intertanglement, I would say, with some really cool guns in pop culture, but sadly this one being one of the more obscure trench guns just didn't really get that much screen time. But thanks to Battlefield 1, it got a little bit, so neat. Holy shit. All right, so running into some issues off the rip. While shooting it, the bayonet lug just threw off. Normally, I believe it's supposed to sit out to here, but now I pushed it all the way back to give it a chance. It's still kind of loosey-goosey on the gun, not as tight as I want it to be. So maybe I'll try and crank it down some more. And then we're having issues. This is day one with filming with it. I can only get 2 into the tube down low. So a grand total of only 3 in the gun at the moment. So this is not ideal.
Huh. American weapons. The German weapon would never do that.
All right, buddy, start running. So when I got this Remington Model 10 Trench, it came with a very unique feature, a wooden dowel in the tube of the magazine. So for whatever reason, the guy I bought it from, I don't think he told me. So I'm like jogging my memory to think back if he told me or not when I bought it. He had a tube, or he had this rod in the gun to limit the tube capacity, which is super weird because we're in Arizona. He was also in Arizona as a guy that sold me this. So very weird. I don't know why he did that, but my buddy Joel of Auto Weapons Work took it out for me, our unofficial gunsmith. So then when I talked about it earlier in the video about how I can only get 2 in there, that is why. So the problem has been, of course, solved. I will say it's very interesting seeing how like the older shotguns usually only have the one arm that's connected to the pump, whereas the newer shotguns have the dual arms. You know, I think it's still, of course, gonna work. This isn't really like a weapons review. It's more so me doing show and tell of a cool toy. So some problems I had, though, were going to be some failure to feeds. So when I'm shooting, I would pump it and then I get a click from the gun. And I knew there was shotgun shells in the tube, and so I'd have to pump it again. So there's some failure to feed there, and that was about it. And then of course the problem of the lug coming loose every so often. So really 2 major issues. Outside of that, nothing really bad in that aspect. Now, an interesting note is that in World War I, they were planning to use brass cased shells. At the time, they did have the paper case shells, but you know, in the trenches of Europe, those things tend to get wet and not really work too well in the gun. But I think the brass didn't really show up in great number in time. I even reached out to AAC, the ammo sponsor of the channel. Wow, what a plug. And I was like, hey, please make some freaking brass shotgun shells. So who knows, maybe AAC will come out with something in the future, but they have a lot of projects in the pipeline, so I don't know if they will. But if we bully them enough, there may be a chance. So, but yet again, anyway, thanks to AAC for sponsoring the channel with some ammo, even though we didn't use any of their shotgun ammo because they need to make some brass. Bully them. Now, if I'm doing like the Dan Carlin hardcore history, I'm putting myself in the mindset. By the way, Blueprint for Armageddon, fantastic series by Dan Carlin. Go listen to it if you haven't. It's about World War I. It's pretty gnarly. But if I'm putting myself in the mindset of a guy at the time, and my options are a bolt action, I know I'm going into trench warfare, and they have some inclination based off the media coming back from the conflict of what the Americans are heading into. I absolutely would be like, yeah, I'll take a trench gun, knowing that all I have to do is just pump and shoot as opposed to like cycle a bolt. Now, in more open terrain, would I want that shotgun? You know, you can still get close, you can still maneuver around. If you had to take a shot out to 100 yards, you may do something. You may do something, but it's not as good as it is up in tight quarters. That's because it's just the nature of a shotgun. And I do love the feeling of the trench gun. Even when it's fully loaded, it does balance nicely. I was doing a lot of holding it by the middle over here, and when I'm holding it like that, it feels really good in the hand. Yeah, there's some weight to it, but to me, the weight feels very nominal. It's still very wieldy, especially compared to like, say, a bolt gun. And those bolt guns are not like massive. Granted, I'm probably bigger than the guys at the time. You know, we Americans have gotten bigger and bigger as the generations have come and gone. But overall, it feels really good. I love the aggressive feeling of a shotgun, especially when I'm playing hell let loose, knowing I have to close the gap and get close, and knowing that I'm actually going to dismember my German counterparts.
Oh, yes.
It feels very aggro, especially coupled with that bayonet. I mean, come on, man. You got a freaking spear. I mean, you legit have a whole spear-ass platform. Because why the Americans bring a shotgun? Because we're goddamn Americans, that's why. Thank you, Ian McComb, for that segment. Good old Ian. So it feels pretty solid. Even with the bayonet on there, it wobbles a little bit, but it's not bad. Overall, very interesting weapon. It's a very cool part of history. Gentlemen, I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate you watching. I have nothing else for you guys. I'll catch you on the flip. Lies, I have something else. Gentlemen, if you want to support the channel, what we do here, Patreon is an excellent way to patron the arts that you like to see. YouTube is not a big fan of what we do here, so check out the Patreon. We also have some merchandise. Merchandise helps out a lot, so rock some swag, look cool. Your mom will be like, wow, what a cool t-shirt, young man. You're surely going to find a wife and make children with that garb.